We are here because you deserve to feel safe, respected, and seen. Not just seen, but recognized for the competence you carry, the expertise you embody, and the professional dignity you maintain in every environment. I've watched the scenario play out too many times. The moment when routine prejudice hits highly sensitive policy, and suddenly, the small, deliberate choices you make flip the script entirely. It's a terrifying moment when you're facing abuse. But the power you seek isn't in raising your voice or matching the aggressor's volume. It's in lowering it, slowing down your response, and citing the specific rule, regulation, or contract paragraph that governs the interaction. Want to see why this procedural approach is fundamentally superior to immediate conflict? Imagine a boarding gate gone utterly silent. The aggressive, dismissive agent suddenly stops talking, his practiced condescension melting away. Because you didn't argue about your dignity. You asked for three specific words that instantly freeze a hostile policy application, the specific paragraph number. That calm procedural request is a surgical strike, far better than shouting. It's the quiet, documented step that can flip a multi-million dollar deal, or in 24 hours, secure official accountability in a hostile hotel lobby, or permanently remove a problematic, prejudicial manager from their position. This definitive shift from immediate reactive indignation to precise forensic competence is the only reliable mechanism for moving from experiencing abuse to achieving verifiable accountability. We protect our dignity and ensure long term change by focusing exclusively on verifiable proof, established procedure, and codified policy. Let's talk about Dr. Lena Chen and the incident at Gate 47. Dr. Chen wasn't having a great travel day. She was an accomplished senior executive in the regulatory compliance sector, but she was exhausted, dressed for maximum comfort on a cross country flight, not for traditional boardroom optics. Critically, she carried the heavy weight of an imminent, high stakes safety audit, an audit absolutely crucial for a major U.S. carrier, Aeropath, which was aggressively bleeding revenue, stock value, and executive confidence due to severe, systemic compliance failures flagged by the FAA. Aeropath's very operational future hinged on this audit. Dr. Chen was heading to the final confidential stakeholder meeting, carrying crucial classified operational and structural documents in her personal item. She approached the Gate 47 counter, presenting her first-class boarding pass, ready to board. The gate agent, a young man named Mark, barely glanced up at her face. He looked pointedly past her, then let his gaze settle dismissively down at her technical carry-on, a high-end, structured ballistic nylon backpack designed for secure technology transport, conspicuously not a luxury designer bag. Ma'am, standard operational protocol absolutely requires me to check the dimensions of all personal items before boarding, Mark asserted, his voice overly loud, laced with obvious and targeted condescension. It was immediately clear that he hadn't subjected anyone else in the rapidly forming priority line to this scrutiny. The selective enforcement was palpable. Dr. Chen maintained a tight, neutral, professional demeanor, forcing back the instinct to react emotionally. Understood, Mark. However, this is the same bag that was checked and approved by TSA security clearance, and which I used without incident on the connecting flight in the same fare class. It demonstrably fits all FAA and carrier regulations for a certified personal carry-on. My boarding pass specifically confirms my priority status, which includes the allowance for one certified personal item and one roller bag. Mark scoffed audibly, leaning back against the counter, displaying a profound lack of professional restraint. Look, I don't know what you think you're carrying or what deals you pulled, but rules are rules, regardless of status. Maybe on your usual airline, this flies, but not here on Aeropath. The bag looks oversized visually, and frankly, this ticket looks like it was issued in error by an outside party. He deliberately paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. The blatant assertion that a woman who looked like her, dressed for comfort, could not possibly belong or be legitimate in the first-class cabin, or be carrying documents of critical importance. The insult was clear. Her appearance invalidated her ticket. Here is precisely where the common, debilitating mistake happens. The gut instinct, fueled by justifiable rage, is to launch into an emotional, self-defensive explanation. I earned this ticket. I am a key consultant. How dare you question my importance? That predictable path leads invariably to frustration, often generating shaky video evidence of you losing control or appearing disruptive, resulting in zero tangible accountability for the agent and certainly no systemic correction. Dr. Chen felt the heat rising in her face, the deep, familiar, and exhausting insult of being judged instantly as less competent, less wealthy, and fundamentally less deserving, purely based on arbitrary, visible markers. But she stopped herself. She remembered the stringent, repeated counsel of her own legal team, the core principle she enforced daily. Policy beats ego. Leverage precedes confrontation. She didn't engage the implied slur or the attack on her dignity. She engaged the binding, codified rulebook and the legal liability framework Mark and Aeropath were subject to. She took a slow, deep breath, the first essential step in what I call the justice prep mini ritual, and pulled her phone out, not to argue or film a viral moment, but specifically to document the procedure and the specific liabilities involved. "Mark," she said, her voice dropping, noticeably lower and becoming utterly steady, forcing him to lean closer over the counter to hear her, which instantly shifted the power dynamic. "I need two highly specific pieces of information from you. First, I require your supervisor's full name and their operational ID number, clearly stated for the record. Second, I need you to show me, right now, the specific subsection and paragraph number of Aeropath's publicly available carrier conditions of contract, the document legally binding us, that defines the allowable personal appearance or mandates bag size deviation specific to my premium fare class, based solely on visual inspection by a gate agent after the item has successfully received TSA approval." The sentence that stops the entire room is always meticulously procedural. It instantaneously forces them to switch from the comfort of judging your personal worth to the extreme discomfort of managing corporate liability and documenting their potential legal exposure. Mark physically froze. He stumbled over his words, the realization hitting him that he was dealing with someone who not only understood his rulebook but also knew the federal regulatory environment that enforced it. He immediately summoned his supervisor, Sarah, who arrived with an over-rehearsed, dismissive air of defensive authority, clearly intending to shut down the conversation quickly. "We simply don't have time for this unnecessary scene, ma'am," Sarah huffed impatiently, crossing her arms in a posture designed to convey dominance. "You need to comply with the agent's instruction immediately, or we will regretfully have to deny boarding under the right to refuse service policy, specifically citing Section 17. Stop making a scene and get in compliance." Dr. Chen kept her posture rigidly tall, ensuring she appeared entirely non-threatening but immovably firm. Her voice remained perfectly measured. She was now fully in witness mode, her phone quietly and discreetly recording the entire audio exchange, meticulously documenting the exact time, the location, Gate 47, and the agent names. Silence is evidence. Record the refusal. Report the liability. "Supervisor Sarah, I understand Section 17 allows refusal for clear indications of intoxication or verifiable disruptive aggressive behavior. Which of those am I exhibiting? I am politely and professionally requesting the specific written documentation proving that my certified approved bag dimensions actually violate the terms of my prepaid ticketed contract. If you attempt to deny boarding without providing this citation, I will immediately file an official regulatory complaint citing wrongful refusal of carriage under the Federal Aviation Act, specifically 49 U.S.C. paragraph 49702, failure to provide reasonable terms of carriage, and I will copy the Department of Transportation's Office of Civil Rights into that formal correspondence before I leave the airport. Now, the area around the gate counter wasn't just silent. The dozens of passengers nearby were watching intently, looking directly at Sarah, silently waiting for her required procedural countermove or the required document she claimed to possess. Sarah's purported authority, which relied on vague threats, was suddenly challenged by the very legal documents she claimed to uphold. She looked visibly panicked, realizing that this passenger knew the highly complex internal machinery of Aeropath better than she did, and had just elevated the interaction to a federal level. The standoff escalated, drawing the immediate and concerned attention of an older man in a tailored navy suit who had been quietly waiting by the priority boarding lane, reviewing documents. He quickly approached the counter area. "What exactly is the holdup here, Sarah? We are already pushing the departure window," he asked, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable tone of absolute authority that commanded instant, unblinking attention. Sarah visibly wilted under his gaze. "Mr. Holloway, I profoundly apologize. This passenger is being excessively difficult and unnecessarily litigious about her carry-on, citing legal jargon and delaying the preparation for the flight." Dr. Chen immediately turned to face the man. "Mr. Holloway." She did not argue or attempt to correct the narrative Sarah had just constructed. She addressed Holloway professionally, holding his gaze directly, citing the facts. "Sir, I am not being difficult. I am refusing to be penalized without due process or objective justification, which as an executive, I know constitutes a fundamental breach of contract and an admission of arbitrary enforcement. I have requested the specific policy citation that Agent Mark claims I violated, and Supervisor Sarah has instead threatened denial of service under Section 17 without providing any legal basis. I am documenting this entire interaction for my official records and those of the regulatory compliance team." Holloway looked intensely from Dr. Chen to the flustered Mark, then back to the rapidly panicking Sarah. He paused for a critical 5 seconds, absorbing the scene, calculating the systemic risk. Then he looked deeply at Dr. Chen's face with a sudden, devastating flicker of clear recognition. He slowly, formally extended his hand across the counter. "Dr. Chen, my deepest apologies. I am James Holloway, Senior Vice President of Operations. I didn't realize you were on this specific flight. I sincerely apologize for the delay, and I apologize for this obvious confusion among my staff." Confusion? No. Holloway knew the stakes. He was trying desperately to manage the PR disaster and the regulatory catastrophe before it took another breath. Dr. Chen did not shake his hand immediately. She held her ground and his gaze. "Mr. Holloway, I don't believe there is any confusion about the intent or the outcome here. This was a clear, documented example of targeted profiling and arbitrary policy enforcement designed specifically to humiliate a customer based on visible assumptions. I have already initiated the formal documentation process with the necessary regulatory oversight bodies." Then came the definitive moment of status reversal. The day the badge flipped power dynamics permanently. Holloway turned, his face pale and grim, to Sarah and Mark. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a heavy, platinum Aeropath executive badge that identified him not only as a senior VP of operations, but, more critically, as the internal liaison for the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, compliance team. This was a man whose entire job was to manage catastrophic regulatory threats and litigation, and he recognized the exponentially greater danger instantly. "Sarah, Mark, You are both immediately relieved from gate duty. Proceed directly and without delay to the employee relations office on the third floor. I will meet you there in 10 minutes. Holloway didn't shout. His voice was cold, professional, and devastatingly conclusive. He then pivoted back to Dr. Chen, his demeanor shifting instantly from rigid operational authority to extreme deference, tinged with obvious fear. Dr. Chen, I profoundly apologize for how my staff treated you. This behavior is absolutely unacceptable and fundamentally violates the very tenets of the systemic cultural overhaul we specifically hired you to lead. We simply cannot afford this kind of public documented liability, especially not with the audit imminent. Please understand, your executive security clearance should have been automatically flagged for immediate hands-off priority boarding. I will personally escort you and your classified materials onto the aircraft right now. The entire gate area, which had been buzzing with nervous impatience, went utterly, audibly silent. The flight crew, peering out the aircraft door, quickly retreated. Sarah and Mark, stripped of their power and facing professional ruin, looked devastated, lost, and utterly incompetent. The bias they displayed, the casual, dangerous assumption that a qualified, powerful black woman in comfortable clothes couldn't possibly be a critical, highly paid safety expert, had just cost them their shifts and very likely their careers, while simultaneously exposing a massive documented vulnerability in the airline's core culture. That liability was exactly what Dr. Chen was hired to fix, and this incident just handed her all the irrefutable evidence and executive leverage she needed to enforce severe permanent change. This was far more than securing a simple, hollow apology. This was about big deal, bigger dignity. Dr. Chen was spearheading the $500 million contract designed to rebuild Aeropath's entire safety, compliance, and anti-discrimination training protocols. The casual racism and procedural arrogance shown by the gate staff was Exhibit A for why the mandated systemic changes needed to be immediate, deep, and punitive across the entire organization. The accountability was swift and publicly visible. Mark and Sarah were placed on immediate administrative leave pending a detailed internal investigation into bias and procedural failure. Holloway personally guaranteed Dr. Chen that this interaction would serve as the opening, mandatory case study for the required punitive diversity and operational compliance training for all customer-facing personnel, effective within 72 hours. The proof that ends the excuse landed right there at Gate 47, captured on audio and official record. Justice isn't a miraculous event. It is the direct result of procedural precision, meeting focused moral courage. When you feel the hot sting of injustice, you need a mental framework, a practiced, internalized routine to shift instantly from victim mode to procedural powerhouse. We need to internalize this knowledge until it becomes automatic. Your best justice tool requires absolutely no shouting. It demands preparation, composure, and documentation. Let's step back and look at the essential technique, the 10-minute mini ritual for justice prep. This ritual is portable, requires minimal external resources, and should be deployed before entering any high-risk environment: the airport, a bank attempting loan denial, a major corporate meeting, where you expect adversarial behavior, or any time you anticipate conflict or prejudice. The 10-minute mini ritual, centering for competence and compliance. This protocol is not about ignoring the emotion. It is about deliberately channeling that powerful, reactive energy into strategically actionable leverage. Time 0 EOS 1 zeros. The centering breath and grounding. Find an immediate quiet spot, the restroom stall, your car, or an empty corner in a hallway. Close your eyes if safe. Take 3 slow, deliberate square breaths. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold empty For 4. Physically feel your feet solid on the ground or your seat in the chair. This physical action pulls you forcibly out of the panicked, reactive fight or flight state and into the prefrontal cortex, the steady executive function part of your brain. What to feel? Controlled, physically present, and internally calm. Time 1 T2. 3 seconds. Posture and voice calibration. Adjust your body posture to signal calm authority and non aggression. Sit or stand as tall as possible, shoulders relaxed and back. This physical posture broadcasts confidence. Practice your voice. It must be low, steady, and moderate volume. High pitch and high volume are almost guaranteed to trigger defensive aggression and official classification as disruptive behavior. A low, steady, resonant voice forces the listener to strain slightly to tune in, psychologically giving you control and establishing auditory dominance. How to adjust? Focus on deep resonance, clarity of articulation, not sheer volume. Time 3 VO 6 to RAND. Policy. Acquisition and scripting. Open your phone or notepad. Have a neutral, highly formal phrase, prepped and ready to deploy. For banks or financial institutions, this might be: please provide the specific written criteria for this denial of service, including the relevant policy number and the federal or state statute referenced. For transportation or housing, I immediately require a supervisor and a physical or electronic copy of the exact written policy you are citing to justify this action right now. Save easily accessible links to relevant public policies, e.g., specific ADA guidelines, state non-discrimination codes, or carrier contracts of carriage. This specialized vocabulary creates immediate, high-level leverage. The immediate benefit: safety through clarity, legal leverage, and forcing their compliance. Time 6 RAC. 8 Pheasants. Witness mode activation and documentation protocol. Prepare your phone camera or dedicated audio recorder. Understand the laws in your specific state regarding recording consent. Know if it is one-party versus two-party consent. Even if local law prevents public broadcast, internal documentation is absolutely critical for official reports, litigation, or HR escalation. Make a mental note of every detail: the precise time, the exact location, Gate 47, bank lobby, third floor office of HR, and the full names, titles on any badges visible. That level of verifiable objective detail proves high-level competence and preparation. What to meticulously note: who, what, where, when, before they even realize you are tracking their liability. Time 8 was 10 RAND. Visualizing accountability and success. Systematically visualize the procedural outcome you want, not a hostile shout down, but an administrative, verifiable reversal of the initial prejudicial decision. See yourself maintaining perfect documented calm while the other party visibly fumbles for the policy number they don't know or attempts to walk away. Visualize the supervisor formally conceding, the punitive contract pausing, or the mandated apology landing. This exercise primes your mind for less panic and more proof, reinforcing your agency and ultimate power. Goal: agency, dignity protected, and systemic reversal achieved. Remember this, always. Your personal safety is the non-negotiable priority. Always respect your physical and emotional limits. Avoid physical confrontation at all costs. The path to resolution is always documentation and escalation through proper, official, verifiable channels, HR, dedicated legal counsel, and regulatory bodies like the FAA, CFPB, or AEOC. Laws and policies vary wildly by jurisdiction. Know the basics for where you live and travel, and adapt your prepared script accordingly. If you feel truly and physically threatened, abandon the procedure entirely and prioritize immediate safety, seeking law enforcement or professional help immediately. The story of Dr. Chen teaches us that forensic competence and absolutely clear documentation are the twin engines of verifiable justice. She didn't have to announce her power or her salary. She simply had to demand meticulous adherence to the very system she was there to fix. The bias that costs an airline $1 billion isn't always blatant shouting. Often, it's the quiet arrogance and procedural ignorance of low level staff who don't realize they are creating massive liability by violating the very policy that supports a multi-billion-dollar operation. We need to internalize and weaponize the power of policy. When you use procedural codified language, citing 49 USC or referencing Article 4, Section B, Paragraph 2, you are speaking the universal language of corporate liability, regulatory exposure, and litigation risk. That language is universally understood by everyone in actual power, and it triggers accountability systems faster and more effectively than any purely emotional plea. Allies in the room certainly change outcomes, but your thorough, documented preparation is your first, most reliable, and most powerful ally. The best defense against prejudice is often a proactive, disciplined offense of documentation. 3 calm internal steps. 1 loud, public result. Cite policy accurately. Document everything meticulously. And escalate officially through the regulatory channels. Today, choose one specific small thing to start this process. Don't wait until you're emotionally compromised in the situation. Will you save the relevant policy number for your workplace HR rules? Will you set up a phone shortcut for a calm, neutral, procedural phrase? Will you identify one trusted, highly procedural ally in your immediate circle, at work, at school, in your community, who you can call upon immediately if a scenario goes sideways and you need a witness? Then commit to doing the full 10-minute justice prep mini ritual before your next high-stakes interaction. The shift in perspective will fundamentally change the outcome. Tell me, what is the one crucial action you will start today? And what scenario? Workplace discrimination, housing dispute, educational bias? Should we dissect next to find the procedural flaw that delivers justice and accountability? We move forward together with less fear, more clarity, and ultimate dignity protected by policy.